Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. I know this isn't a video or a reaction video or anything like that, but I thought it'd be fun to kind of give you my general thoughts, overall general thoughts of all the Marvel Studios Disney Plus shows they've released up till now. WandaVision, Falcon and Winter Soldier, and Loki. And I thought it'd be good timing because Marvel's What Ifs series starts today. I think episode 1 is being released today. But this will be, unscripted, more off the cuff, just like trying to remember these shows and seeing if I can kind of pinpoint what I liked and what I didn't like. But overall, I thought these three shows were very different in terms of tone and flavor, and I really appreciated that because I think it could be argued that the movies, although they're all pretty great, they all kind of have a very similar vibe, kind of have similar type of tone, I guess. I mean, aside from the more serious movies like, Infinity War and Endgame and, all the different kind of early Phase 1, Phase 2 movies, I feel like over the years it's been kind of becoming more like almost too similar in terms of like how they feel. Like, I know that for the most part, all the movies, have different kind of story content and story elements, but I think these three shows that we got for Disney Plus really kind of hit the nail on the head of how character studies or stuff like delivering different types of stories in albeit a diverse way. They did that so well. So let's start with WandaVision. I'll be honest, going into WandaVision, I wasn't really sure what they're going to give us. And the fact that this show sort of kicked off Phase 4, it makes a lot of sense because, it does touch on a little bit of a multiverse, at least at the end of the show. But at the same time, I really liked how they really incorporated Wanda's sort of idealization of what a suburban home life would be. And with her and Vision and the kids and neighbors, and what kind of shocked me was that whole setup, at least you find out in the show, was drawing from her memories as a child in Sokovia, and how she was, I guess, subconsciously, sort of, maybe not subconsciously, maybe really consciously, and maybe a little bit of subconscious being thrown in there, of how her childhood television shows were being created for her as an adult, as sort of this ideal life that she wanted. And especially given the timing, with what happened to Vision and what happened with like all the things that went down in Infinity War, not just Infinity War, but everything leading up from her debut all the way to WandaVision, how Wanda lost almost everyone dear to her throughout her journey as a character in the MCU, where she was introduced in Age of Ultron, where her and her brother Pietro volunteered to be experiments for Baron Strucker. And, that was because they wanted to do something to combat feeling helpless in Sokovia. Like their parents were lost in the attack with the air raid, I guess, and then growing up in a laboratory where they developed their abilities, and then at the end of Age of Ultron, Pietro dies while he was saving Hawkeye, who was trying to save the kid, and and then she develops a relationship with Vision, and then even in Infinity War, it kind of shows that no one's life is really safe if there's a threat. So coming off of all of that, she's dealing with kind of like maybe suppressed or maybe bottled up trauma, bottled up feelings and emotions that maybe she didn't know how to process because this world of avenging is really new to her. And I don't know if they had the proper sort of things in place to help people deal with that, like whether it be counseling or therapy. I don't think she had any of that really readily available for her, especially after she lost all these people. But I think the setup of how they use sitcoms as the backdrops of all these kind of different maybe psychological trauma really hit the nail on the head. I don't want to keep using that phrase, but they really did it so well. And although, they pulled the rug out from under us and they kind of brought us back to reality in the later episodes, I really like the early episodes because they kind of gave us something different, that's for one. And they kind of give us something familiar, with these old sitcoms and how they should evoke, feelings of nostalgia and like feeling good and feeling like, things are going to be alright because they always kind of are at the end of sitcoms, right? But that's the juxtaposition that they're giving us here. Wants to create a safe space for her and for Vision and their family, but it's all to hide the fact that it's about, trying to, I guess, not deal with the things that you're going through, and because of that, she's becoming ignorant. But at the same time, it's all because, it's not her doing it, right? It's someone else behind the scenes. And it's Agatha Harkness, as we find out, played by the masterful Katherine Hahn. But I really liked how they've they give us the forefront, the sitcom and the story, but there are like undertones, maybe some overtones of Wanda feeling very helpless, maybe feeling very tragic, feeling very fatigued and exhausted by all that she's dealt with up to this point. And it's kind of a great character study, which they do continue in the later shows, but I feel like it is something that can only be done in the TV format, which I really liked. And I really enjoyed everyone's performances. I will be honest though, they kind of wasted Jimmy Woo and Darcy Lewis in there. Although for them showing up, it's nice to see like familiar faces and seeing their roles expanded a little bit. Jimmy Woo is like dealing with these kind of stuff now, not just like small time occurrences or small kind of instances or situations. I will say a breakout performance was Monica Rambeau, played by Teyonah Parris. It's cool seeing how the snap being reversed played out for everybody, and it's how she lost her mother as well. So she's dealing with loss and she tries to connect with Wanda, and they do have that sort of connection, but at the same time, Wanda is in a much more damaged state, much more damaged situation, right? Nothing can really compare to losing your brother, losing the person you care about most in Vision, and even within the show, when she or Agatha conjures up these children, the two kids that she has with Vision, and the feeling of being a family, even that's taken away from her. And by the end of the show, she, feels like she doesn't really belong anywhere. Maybe she doesn't feel like she deserves to be happy, that's why she secludes herself. But, in typical Marvel fashion, there was a big showdown with the villain, which I felt was a little clunky. I will say that the way that Wanda used the runes as she saw Agatha use on her, that was a little clever. But at the same time, is CGI battles with CGI magic fireballs and all that, and I thought Agatha was like a great twist, but they didn't really do much with her. It's just like, hey, it was Agatha all along, and they show the audience her brief kind of backstory or history with who she was in the past and how she came to the present, and that's cool and all, but there's nothing really deeper, And at the end of it all, Wanda just makes Agatha like a background character at the end. So who knows where Agatha will end up. I don't know if she broke out of Wanda's spell or not. And at the end of it all, Wanda is looking at the book that she, I guess, stole from Agatha. And that, I guess, is kind of leading towards Wanda either conjuring up her children again to be real for real this time, or if she has to find them, if these children are just like in some parallel dimensions or something like that. And another wasted opportunity was Evan Peters, who showed up as quote unquote Wanda's brother, but albeit in like a sitcom format. But I feel like that could have been a good nod to multiverse being real. But at the end of it all, we find out that Evan Peters' character isn't actually Pietro from the X-Men Fox universe, but I guess someone named Ralph Boner, which really kind of is a bit of a light slap in the face to your audience who kind of wished that he was the actual Quicksilver character. But in all honesty, it was a nice nod, maybe a little bit of a wasted opportunity, but yeah, overall, WandaVision was great. I like the lines, the kind of last words that Wanda and Vision had with each other before reality uh, came back. Speaking of Vision, the White Vision story or White Vision appearance was a little rushed too. Um, Although the two visions kind of interacting not with fists but with intellect, that was a nice touch too. But yeah, WandaVision was a great start to the Disney Plus shows. I hope to see some of these kind of plot lines expanded on. It'll probably be more focused on Wanda because I think she has a big part to play in the Doctor Strange sequel, The Multiverse of Madness. But we'll see what happens there. But moving on to The Falcon and the Winter Soldier. I thought the show was pretty solid. It's not perfect by any means, but it was nice to see, Sam Wilson, who's struggling. It's not like at the end of Endgame he just takes a shield and runs with it. No, he has doubts too. He's not a super soldier. He's like coming into the role of Cap. Um, after like this huge legacy that Steve Rogers had. And Sebastian Stan as Bucky is also dealing with his own demons, which was nice to see. It was nice to see like how these characters are flawed, like how Bucky still has nightmares about his time as the Winter Soldier, and Sam Wilson who's like dealing with the more modern issues, like how he is the modern day Captain America, like how he's like a black man, how he's maybe disenfranchised, how there's maybe some inequality because of who he is, and even like the framing of how Avenger characters they don't get paid. So seeing him deal with like his real life issues of not being financially stable and how can he help his family and his community, and that was like, although it got real, I really appreciated the honesty the show had about inequality and how sometimes it's not easy being in like a position of not authority but a position of power maybe. There are a lot of power dynamics in Falcon and Winter Soldier because they do touch on like the Flag Smashers, how they're trying to take down, the government, and how, like, after the blip or after all the Thanos stuff, the world is trying to rebuild, but at the same time, those in the position of government power are not necessarily making the right decisions or the most beneficial decisions. So it kind of makes sense where the Flag Smashers are coming from. And then you have Sam Wilson, of course, giving up the role of Cap and giving up the shield in the beginning, and a foil to Sam and Bucky, being in the form of Wyatt Russell's John Walker, who is appointed as a new quote-unquote Captain America by the government. And there's a lot of things going on in Falcon and Winter Soldier, I'll be honest. There's a lot of different kind of subplots that go on. I feel like the Flag Smashers and Carly Morgenthau's story got kind of sidetracked. Like they tried to put it at the forefront, but I think it was a little disorganized. Especially in the final episodes, how um, you know Carly's coming from a place of she wants to help people, but they just paint her as like this freedom fighter or terrorist or what have you, and in the end she dies. That's never like a great way to let a character go out. Um, she's doing villainous things, and you see where she's coming from. It's kind of like the Killmonger situation for Black Panther. where Killmonger, you understand his motivations, but at the end of the day, you don't agree with the methods. And they could have done a little different, something a little different, but at the end, Carly is painted as like a villain, but they do have this long conversation at the end where Sam Wilson's talking to the government officials in front of the press where everything's being recorded. And they could have handled that a little better because the kind of conversation and discussion that happens at the end is a bit heavy-handed and is a lot of like exposition dumping. But I don't know, like overall, Falcon and Winter Soldier, is dealing with very different themes than WandaVision, right? Like Falcon and Winter Soldier is dealing with government authority, dealing with inequality, and even with if people who have inner demons can change and can move forward in the form of Bucky, in the form of Sharon Carter, like even Sharon Carter, I feel like was a bit of a not a red herring because everyone kind of guessed and deduced that she was actually the power broker in the end. But even when she gets her pardon, she's so jaded by being burned by the government that she worked for that she doesn't even want to go back, want to make a fresh start. Well, I guess you can count being power broker as a fresh start. But even characters like Zemo, who was very well realized in Civil War, but here I feel like they made him more out to be. No, actually, scratch that. I think they gave Zemo like a pretty interesting side to him in this show. He's very intellectual. We know that, but although he's like a villain, maybe an anti-hero sometimes, he had very interesting opinions and very interesting things to say about, there's never been another Steve Rogers. People in positions of power may not always make the best choices, stuff like that. And it's interesting that it's coming from him because he was the one who's very like anti-establishment or anti, authoritarian stuff, right? Because in Civil War, his main goal was to break up the Avengers because he didn't trust that the Avengers had everyone's or the world's best interests in mind. He was more or less trying to, be someone who can be a foil not only to the Avengers, but I guess trying to show the world that groups like those who didn't operate under anyone's authority, under their own authority, maybe they have the best of intentions, but everyone else that's caught in the crossfire or caught in the consequences of their actions, don't benefit, right? So I feel like Falcon and Winter Soldier did a good job of addressing bodies of power, and even at the street level, the scene where Sam and Bucky go to see Isaiah Bradley, right? After their first encounter with Isaiah Bradley, they go back out into the street, they're arguing, and then, police show up, and because Sam is a black man, they instantly assume that he's the one that's causing trouble, and that's a very real thing that happens. And seeing that scene hit pretty deep. I haven't really experienced that myself, but I can understand how humiliating and how disappointing it is for people of different race. They can't even just walk down the street. And Isaiah's kind of story in this, or his side of the story, kind of touches upon how history kind of doesn't properly honor those who were, fighting in the line of duty, right? Those who may have been kind of left by the wayside, even though they gave it their all to fight for their country, fight for freedom. I feel like they could have streamlined a lot of things with Falcon and Winter Soldier's pacing. There's a lot of moving parts. You have the Flag Smashers, you have the Power Broker, you have Zemo, you have, John Walker and government body of power, blah blah blah. It's all like well and good, but I feel like it kind of got all muddled at the end of it because Flag Smashers are just like bad guys to take out now, and the Power Broker didn't really have much to do with. Probably gonna do more in like the movies or season 2 or something. There's a lot of setup. Even John Walker, I feel like they could have ended the show better, because with him, with his character at least, because you know when you're introduced to him, you instantly don't like him, and then you're shown kind of his side of the story and how he's like just like a trained soldier, right? And you kind of feel for him when he's at the trial and how like the government's trying to say you're not the new cap anymore, but he said like you trained me to do all these things. I just followed your orders. And and then obviously he's gonna be like U.S. agent and go off with Valentina and like maybe create the Dark Avengers. But you know, when you see John Walker in this show, he's not a one-dimensional character. He's dealing with having to fill in the role of Cap, having to deal with loss of his best friend, dealing with the loss by telling his friend's family how he went out, and he had the lies to kind of preserve their feelings and their emotions. And then he did kind of reach a breaking point where when he killed that person, that flag smasher with the shield, after taking the super soldier serum himself. I wish they kind of kept with that tone, because at the end of the show, he's like bringing in flag smashers with Bucky, and they're like trading banter, and like I didn't think that kind of properly conveyed the character that John Walker is, because he's a normal guy. He has a bit of super soldier serum in him, but I wish they kept with like that twisted mentality, the twisted personality. But across the board, it's a very solid show. I like the moments of levity they had. It was great seeing, Bucky slightly flirting with Sam's sister. But we'll see where the MCU goes with the new Captain America and the Winter Soldier. Will Bucky even keep the name Winter Soldier? But we'll see where those kind of plot lines go. And it'll be nice to see the new Cap on the big screen. But let's move forward and let's change gears to the most recent show, which is Loki. I gotta say, out of the three, I enjoyed Loki the most, not because it's the newest, but it's because Loki gave us something very different. WandaVision gave us something different too. Falcon and Winter Soldier was pretty similar in terms of tone with Civil War and Captain America the Winter Soldier, so it kind of falls in the same vein, so you kind of have that familiar feeling. But Loki gave us something brand spanking new with the TVA, with time hopping, with variants. It was a great ride. Like the other shows, it's not perfect, I will say, but in my opinion, it's the strongest of the three. Just in terms of bringing something fresh, bringing like interesting new things, new elements into the MCU, and what do you know, it also ended with them opening up the multiverse. So I think Loki was a great show overall. I liked the idea of the TVA, and I liked how they pulled away the curtains to kind of see what it is, and albeit within like another exposition dump from Jonathan Majors as Kang. Nothing against Jonathan Majors, he's a great actor, but I feel like they could have done a lot more of show don't tell, or show while telling, which they sort of did with that kind of projection that Kang did while he was explaining how he organized the TVA and stuff. But it would have been nice to see more scenes, like flashback scenes, rather than exposition dumping. I guess it's a limitation of TV budget, but I thought this was a very well realized show, not just about time hopping or multiverse opening, but I feel like Loki as a character really grew, and it's interesting because this Loki is the one from 2012's Avengers, right? He's the one who is still a bit cynical, still a bit maybe unclear of who he is and what he wants. Because the more established Loki that we've seen, from Thor to the Dark World to Ragnarok to Infinity War, right? That journey that we saw with him was great. And of course, this is a different Loki, right? This is a variant, so to speak. but it's nice to see him on a different path, right? Not just on a path of self-acceptance, self-acknowledgement of who he is and maybe his flaws and maybe his like darkest, deepest desires, but also like he was like given a mirror multiple times in this show, like with all the other variants, with like Sylvie and classic Loki and kid Loki and boastful Loki, right? Even alligator Loki. And it's always hard to kind of face your own insecurities, maybe face your own flaws, but this show kind of brought home how it's okay to not be okay, right? And even on the touches upon the themes of like self-love, loving yourself, taking care of yourself, being good to yourself, albeit in a weird sort of like variant way. It's not incestuous, right? But it's that theme of self-acceptance overall. I feel like, and from there you can grow into a better person, right? Who knows where they're gonna go with Loki in season two? And yeah, like even characters like Mobius and Renslayer and Hunter B-15, when they learn the truth, uh, accepting that truth is hard. That's more from a story's perspective because they're plucked from their timelines to work for the TVA. But Mobius comes into his own. He had to basically accept that everything he'd known up to that point, working for the TVA, it was all a lie, and the world came shattering down, even for B-15. Um, yeah, like how do you move forward from a reality that you thought was all you had and all you knew, and how do you move forward from that? Even for Loki, right? When he discovers that where he ultimately ends up is dying by Thanos' hand, and it was all on a projection screen. He didn't experience those things. But how do you move on from, knowing that your life is going to end up in a certain way, but you can change that probably. But also, ultimately, the sacred timeline is a bit moot now because I guess everything post Thanos because the multiverse opened up, so this will be a very different Loki. But I did like Tom Hiddleston in this iteration because he it seemed like he was having a lot of fun with it, and he's known the character. He's been with the character for so long now that he can kind of like show different sides and be comedic, be dramatic, be sarcastic. It was nice. It was a really good, really amazing performance, and nothing against the other actors. They all did well too. Like Owen Wilson, Sophia DiMartino as Sylvie. She killed it. She crushed it. But it was a great show because they jumped around to different kind of timelines, different new areas, and it kind of builds anticipation for season two. But not only for that, but how He Who Remains or how Kang is going to be sprinkled throughout the MCU moving forward in Phase 4. But like I said, Loki is my favorite of the three so far because of how abstract and how out there it was and how silly it was too at certain points. You gotta love classic Loki. Richard E. Grant crushed it as classic Loki, but it was a great show overall, and I really appreciate the themes you can take from it. This show and the other shows and the other two shows that preceded it, it's cool that they touch upon very different things, very human things. With WandaVision, it's about tragedy and loss and trauma. Falcon and Winter Soldier is about inequality and maybe feeling inadequate and maybe feeling that you can't live up to everyone's expectations. And Loki is about more or less self-acceptance and seeing different sides to yourself and seeing how you can like build a better life and new life for yourself even though you may know or things in the past that may have happened, or maybe you expect certain things to go a certain way but they don't have to. It's all about like change and self-improvement and all that kind of good stuff. But at the end of it all, I really enjoyed what the MCU has brought so far with the Disney Plus shows. We'll see how the others do. I'm kind of excited mainly for Moon Knight because that's going to be a very interesting character to see on screen and how he deals with his own personal demons, right? But Kevin Feige is still impressing me because he's keeping it all together, keeping the phases pretty tight with how they progress and how they connect. I will say though, I'm wondering if people will go into the movies without having seen the shows, Like, I don't know if he's confirmed this, but he said like you should be able to watch the movies on their own. But I'm gonna assume that he might change his perspective on that because these shows really do add a lot to these characters who will undoubtedly be a big part of the MCU movies. So I wonder if they will not just they're not gonna summarize or have like these plot summaries for these characters in the movies, right? You're gonna have to kind of go in blind, I guess, if you haven't seen the shows. And I don't think they're gonna leave people who will choose not to watch the shows or haven't seen these shows. They're not gonna leave them in the dark. But there's so much added dimension when you have watched the shows, right? And I feel like it's a bit unfair for people who may only have time to watch the movies or are only interested in the movies. But it is what it is. Phase 4 is shaping up to be a very interesting phase because you're not only opening up the multiverse, you're also opening up different avenues to new characters. Monica Rambeau from WandaVision is going to be another Captain Marvel, and then you have Young Avengers, and then Dark Avengers was being set up in Falcon and the Winter Soldier. And Loki brought in like variants, of course, but also the multiverse and how maybe Kang is going to be sprinkled throughout the multiverse now. So we're going to be treated to a lot of different things, and I just hope that it can be organized and streamlined enough that audiences will not get lost, not get super turned off by how convoluted it might be or it might become. But hopefully that doesn't happen. Hopefully everything is organized to the point where it can be understandable, and you can like enjoy it, right? And I think to the MCU's credit, it does well with long form storytelling, albeit within different shows and movies, right? Multiple movies. And I think that's going to be a bit tougher going forward because you're going to have a lot of different elements added into the MCU now, especially with the multiverse opening up. So we'll see how they handle it. Overall, these 3 shows were great for very different reasons. Obviously these are my opinions, and if you liked a different show over another, and if you disagree, that's okay. Everyone is entitled to their own opinions and have different perspectives that they go in and come out with these shows, with any kind of entertainment medium. But I like them. These shows are great. Different flavors, like I said in the beginning. But yeah, like it's only getting me more excited to see what they come up with later on with other shows, right? I just hope that it's all organized enough. But those are my general thoughts. Sorry if it's a little long-winded. Sorry if it was a little disorganized in terms of sharing my thoughts. But I wanted to give you guys something, and I know that for the MCU fans, such as myself, that it's all going to be very interesting moving forward, especially with Phase 4. Let me know all your thoughts in the comments. Feel free to share your thoughts about what you thought of WandaVision, The Falcon and the Winter Soldier, and Loki in the comments below. Let's have civil discussions and civil kind of opinion sharing. And I guess I'll see you in the next video whenever that will be. Be safe, take care of yourselves, and thanks for listening, I guess.